Hi, I'm Mike Troy, host of the American Revolution podcast on the Airwave Media Network. This podcast is the origin story of the United States, how we went from colonies ruled by a king to the democratic republic that we have today. The American Revolution podcast tells the story of the revolution from beginning to end. Please subscribe for free. We're available on all major podcast platforms. I hope you will join me today on the American Revolution podcast.
In 1975, when the SS Edmund Fitzgerald left port from the westernmost tip of Lake Superior, the early November weather was sunny and unseasonably warm.
So you think, okay, that's kind of good news. It's very bad news.
This is John U. Bacon, author of the recent book, The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Because the longer winter takes to show up, the angrier it arrives.
Oh.
And so you want it to be a nice, smooth transition into winter on the Great Lakes, and this is not that, which means all the bad weather is behind a dam waiting to break. That's one problem. Second problem is the Alberta Clipper, a very common storm in from Alberta, Canada, obviously. And it goes across the states right into the Great Lakes, bringing cold, dry air. They're used to that one. Third one is another storm system, an even worse one, from the southwestern United States, bringing hot, wet air. And all of this is going to collide right over Lake Superior, right in front of Whitefish Bay, like a catcher guarding home plate. Whitefish Bay is the far eastern part of the lake, and that is safety zone for them. So what the ship is trying to do is get from the head of the lakes, which is Superior / Duluth, Minnesota, 350 miles to Whitefish Bay. And these three storm systems, if you will, are going to stop it.
Wow. So this was a snowstorm, a rainstorm, wind?
It was all of the above.
"29 men were aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald that day. It was a giant industrial vessel that carried more than 26,000 tons of iron ore in its cavernous belly, little round pellets called taconite, mined in northeastern Minnesota. John actually has some.
Yeah, there you go.
It looks like a raisin or something.
It's a rusty marble, basically, yes.
Yeah, rusty marble, like a darkened pistachio.
Exactly.
The Edmund Fitzgerald was bound for Detroit, where automobile companies would take all those rusty metal pistachios and turn them into new cars. But Mother Nature had other plans for this beloved ship, its crew, and cargo.
They had no idea at that time, with this beautiful weather, wearing t-shirts and shorts, that this was going to get that nasty that fast. But within a few hours, it's pretty clear the storm is coming.
As we know, multiple storm systems were, in fact, converging from different directions.
It started out being wind, and then waves, and then rain, and then snow, all within about 24 hours. And it got worse and worse as you went along. So you start out with 5 or 10 foot waves. You end up with waves that are 30, 40, 50 foot waves.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and now you got 50 foot waves coming overboard. What they call green water. The white splashy stuff is not good, but it's not nearly as scary as green water is. You're basically underwater. That is a wave coming over your entire ship. And that stuff weighs tons upon tons upon tons.
You don't think of those sorts of storms affecting lakes. That sounds more like an ocean storm.
My East Coast buddy, let me school you on this stuff.
From Smithsonian Magazine and PRX Productions, this is There's More to That, the show that plumbs the depths of stories about unsolved mysteries across this watery planet. In this episode, part 1 of a 2-part miniseries on the shipwrecks of the Great Lakes, the story of the most infamous incident of them all, and the impact of the Edmund Fitzgerald's legacy a half a century later. Plus, John U. Bacon schools me on the dangers of lake storms. Stay tuned.
Commercial sailors will tell you that the Great Lakes are actually more dangerous than the ocean, which seems to me crazy.
To jump in for context here, these lakes are just enormous. Lake Superior alone is about half the size of Florida. Even so, you might not guess that navigating these waters could be more perilous than sailing on the ocean.
So the salties, the guys in the oceans, they all laugh about the Great Lakes until they're on them. And they stop laughing pretty quickly. When it's smooth, it's gorgeous and it's pretty simple. But when it's not, it gets ugly very fast for a lot of reasons. One, the salt on the oceans squashes down the points of the waves. It weighs them down, and it also spreads them out. So you get these big but smooth roller coasters. Still not fun and still can be dangerous. But by and large, you're probably going to get over it. It's not going to be pleasant, but you'll get there. On the Great Lakes, there are peaks like mountaintops, and they're twice as close together.
Which means that during a bad storm, waves the size of a 4-story building can come at you every 4 to 8 seconds.
And that's how ships crack. They actually crack. And this has happened many times in the Great Lakes.
And that's eventually what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald 50 years ago this month. Because everyone aboard perished, the specifics of what happened that day are shrouded in historical debate. John U. Bacon has his own take.
The Edmund Fitzgerald found itself in the exact wrong spot at the exact wrong time.
It was no shoddy ship either. It got its name from a well-to-do life insurance CEO who had the vessel built in 1957 and 1958.
His 5 uncles were all captains. His grandfather was a captain, big seafaring family. And they built the best ship on the Great Lakes, and it wasn't close. It was the longest for a long time. It had 729 feet, which is a 73-story tall building on its side. It could carry the biggest loads by far. It set every record on the Great Lakes and did it for many years, until like 71, when the 1,000-footers finally came out. So it was the best one. It was also the best appointed. They hired J.L. Hudson's, the old department store out of Detroit, and said, spare no expense, and they didn't. It was better than all the cruise ships of the time for the crew and for the 2 staterooms for VIPs. And I wondered, why the heck are you spending your money on that when you're trying to move iron ore? And the answer is you wanted the best crew and captain on the Great Lakes, and they got them. And you wanted the VIPs to be happy and keep on ordering more iron, basically. So they could offer you one thing that even those rich guys could not get anywhere else, and that is a trip on the Great Lakes on an iron carrier.
Can you describe the Great Lakes in 1975, their importance economically, and how they were being used by ships for transporting goods?
Sure. Trains are twice as efficient as trucks, and ships are 3 times more efficient than trains. Therefore, ships are 6 times more efficient than trucks. That is an advantage of 600%. That's enormous. So whenever you can ship things by ship versus trucks or trains, you take it. And luckily for the Midwest, all the raw materials you want are in the north. The iron ore, copper, limestone, lumber, and wheat and crops. So all the stuff starts off in Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and the Upper Peninsula of the state of Michigan. And you ship it all to the mills and the factories in the South. And that's Gary, Indiana, Chicago, Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, Buffalo. That's where this stuff's going. So this is a much better way to carry things. This was the Silicon Valley in the 1950s and 60s of the entire world. This is the wealthiest breadbasket you could ever think of. Detroit, by some measures, was the wealthiest city in the world in 1958 when this ship was built. And it's hard to believe now, but that's what they had. They had all this raw resources. They had all these factories. And the key is bringing all this stuff down through the Soo Locks. The Soo Locks in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, is where the 21 feet elevation from Lake Superior to Lake Huron gets handled. It was so vital during World War II that FDR stationed 7,000 soldiers in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan to protect the Soo Locks, making it the most protected spot in North America during World War II. Because he knew that if the Germans bombed Soo Locks, the arsenal of democracy fails. The whole point is getting the iron from the north to Willow Run, Detroit, and that's where the bombers come from, the tanks, the bullets, all that stuff. So this was the crucial bottleneck for all of U.S. industry, essentially.
Amazing. Wow. So the Edmund Fitzgerald kind of arrives on the scene during this golden age for the Great Lakes. Who was aboard, and what was life like on the Edmund Fitzgerald?
In 1975, 29 men were on the ship, about 9 from the head of the lakes, Duluth area, about 7 from Toledo and 7 from Cleveland. This was the most experienced crew on the Great Lakes because it was the most desirable ship. So you use your seniority to get your way there. Once you're on it, you don't want to get off it.
Yeah.
So they worked very hard to stay on the ship. They had the best food by far on the Great Lakes. And even these VIPs who had seen everything, Queen Elizabeth II, everything else, they said, this is by far the best food. Newspapers would gush about it.
What did they serve?
Food on everything, man. Saturday night was steak night. Friday night was lobsters. And this is for the crew as well as for the VIPs. You could get all the steaks you wanted. There are no limits on any of the food.
Was it unusual to have this kind of mixed luxury cruise / cargo ship?
Yes. The Fitz was simply the best. It was Titanic. It's the ship that everybody wanted to be on. And they were the rock stars of the Great Lakes. People by the hundreds would collect to cheer them on as they go through the Sulaks. The guys on the ship said, you felt like a rock star on this ship. You had arrived.
Yeah, and so you stayed.
So you worked very hard to stay. And a lot of ships did not get along because you've got 2 parts of a ship. You've got the wheelhouse, where the captain and his first mates and so on, where they work. The deckhands all above deck. And then below deck in the back, you've got the engine guys, the engineers, the wipers, the oilers, and so on. And those 2 groups usually do not get along. It's like offense and defense in a football team. But on this ship, they got along extremely well. Even the generations got along. Most of these guys had served in World War II, but the 6 young guys, 20 to 22, all had long hair and were all trying to avoid Vietnam. And that usually was another schism you got on other ships. But on this ship, thanks to Captain McSorley, an unusually good guy, they all got along quite well. So they worked very hard to stay on that ship.
But let's be clear, commitment to this work was tough too.
These guys are on the ship 9 months out of the year. You get on and you fit out, as they say, in March and usually go straight through December. So they have the photos of their family in their cabin next to their bunk, and they put them down until the last week of the season because it's too hard to see your parents, your wife, and your kids all season long. So it's a very hard lifestyle in many ways. The flip side is they came from blue-collar backgrounds, and their parents and grandparents were in the mines of the UP, copper mines and so on, iron mines. They were farmers, they were factory workers. This is probably better than all that. So they felt by and large appreciative. And now, thanks to state schools and unions and so on, these guys' kids could all go to state schools, and they by and large did.
We've been hearing a bit about the ship's captain, Ernest McSorley. He was a notoriously hard worker and was at the top of his game.
He was, by all accounts, the best captain of the Great Lakes, the best pilot. One of the guys who had been on the ship 3 years earlier said, that guy, I saw him do it. Parked a 729-foot ore carrier between 2 ships with 5 feet on either side.
Oh my
As though
goodness.
you were parallel parking your pickup truck. This guy was that good. And he was not cocky, he was confident. The guys loved him and they'd follow him from ship to ship to ship. That was very rare. He's a noble guy in many ways, but he's known as the most aggressive captain on the Great Lakes. There's no record of him ever having turned around in a storm.
Oh my
or found in
gosh.
lee. Exactly. He just goes. But then on his last trip of his life, he faces the storm of a century that he's never seen before. So his calculations are off.
Not only was this to be the last trip for the Edmund Fitzgerald crew that year, it was meant to be the very last voyage of Captain McSorley's career.
He and 5 of his buddies, been sailing together for 30 years, they all said they're going to retire after this season, and this was the last trip.
November 9th, 1975 was balmy, but McSorley had a hunch about the storm systems brewing ahead.
So they take what's called the northern route. Instead of doing a straight shot, basically, across Lake Superior, which is 350 miles wide, they're going to go the long way, which is hugging the coast. The west coast, the northern coast, and the eastern coast of Lake Superior. And this is one of the very few cautious decisions that Captain McSorley ever made in his entire career. He's a very aggressive captain. But his last trip, let's play it safe. That decision inadvertently cost them 14 hours. Those 14 hours would have been enough for them to get into Whitefish Bay, I believe, before the epicenter of the storm actually found them.
And there were other problems. Bacon says McSorley wasn't as familiar with this roundabout route. The charts of the lakes he had were outdated, and he had to pass a tiny outcropping of land called Caribou Island.
Right in front of that, to the north of it, is 6 Fathoms Shoal.
An area of water only about 36 feet deep on average.
Which itself is way too dangerous to be anywhere near. But in parts, it's only 11 feet, which is no deeper than a backyard pool. So there's no way a ship should be anywhere near this, obviously, even in calm weather, let alone wavy weather.
But that wavy weather inevitably came, and by the time the Fitzgerald neared Caribou Island, the storm was raging.
Now you got 30 or 40 foot waves washing over you, and you're probably about to hit 6 Fathom shoals. So that damages the bottom of the ship almost certainly.
Meaning that the ship was likely slamming into the...
Yes, the lake floor, which is sandstone. It's very hard. So that's very bad. And after that, it develops a starboard list to the right, which means it's got to be taking on tons of water. And at that point, now you got all kinds of problems. You're like a 3-legged animal in the wild. You are very vulnerable to what the waves might do. And then, Ari, a few hours later, that's when you hit the epicenter of the storm. And here's another sad part. It's not clear if McSorley knew how much water he was taking on or why. It sounds crazy to me that you would not know if you hit the bottom of a lake floor, especially when it's sandstone. But the guys I've talked to, the captains who know this stuff, they say actually the wave action is already so violent. They said you're not splashing into these things. It's like a train wreck every time you hit a wave, every 4 to 8 seconds. It's bang, 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 bang.
Right, because they're hitting the water.
One.
So it's not like it's pushing through it, it's hitting it. It's almost more like a solid surface.
Exactly. When you're seeing this kind of waves, you get almost drunk from the waves themselves. You cannot think clearly. So believe it or not, it's possible that McSorley would not have known that he hit the bottom of 6 Fathoms Shoal.
On top of all this, McSorley was likely sleep deprived from the voyage thus far.
So you've not slept in 36 hours, and now with the wave action, you can't think clearly on top of that. He was doing quite well from what we could tell, based on his radio communications.
McSorley had been in communication with his friend Bernie Cooper, who was captain of another cargo ship that was making the same journey at the same time. But Cooper's ship, the Arthur M. Anderson, was too many miles away when the Edmund Fitzgerald ran into trouble. And to make matters worse, the ship's radar went out. So he's going full bore, tilted, taking on water, a damaged keel towards the port, and then what happened?
We're not quite sure because they're alone at that point. So on the last communication that McSorley has with Captain Bernie Cooper, when Cooper asked him around 7 o'clock at night on Monday, November 10th, how are you making out with all your problems? And his problems include vent covers being blown off, the fence railing is down, the radars are out, but also, most importantly, the list. The list means water's coming in. And he says, and I quote, "We are holding our own." And that is the last communication from the MS Fitzgerald.
Oh, wow. And so then the ship went down. We don't know exactly how, but presumably it was being sunk and battered, and it just couldn't hold on anymore.
There are a lot of guesses out there, but we do know whatever happened, happened fast. How do we know that? Because McSorley, as you say, a very experienced captain, never got an SOS out. They never released the 2 lifeboats, which either one could fill the entire crew.
Right.
Only one guy we know of put on a life jacket who was still down there. The others did not have life jackets on. So whatever happened probably happened very quickly. Almost everybody agrees on that.
When the ship was found days later, sunken to the lake floor, it was split apart.
But did that happen after it hits the bottom hard at 30 miles an hour? Or does that happen on the surface? And we're not quite sure.
And here's the unsolved mystery. There are many different theories out there about what actually caused the Edmund Fitzgerald to sink. The Coast Guard's official statement at the time said that the crew had failed to properly clamp down the door to the cargo holds, allowing water to seep in and drown the boat. But John doesn't buy that explanation.
It doesn't add up. The clamps we've seen down there are fastened properly. Some have been busted, but probably because of the air pressure as it's going down, in 500 feet of water and or hitting the bottom again at 30 miles per hour. And also I talked to 2 crewmen who are colleagues of the crew. And they said there's no way you'd ever leave port in a storm like that without all the clamps fastened. So I'm not buying the clamps.
Then there's the paperclip theory. The Edmund Fitzgerald was designed and engineered in an innovative way for its time. It had a long, continuously welded steel hull. Because of that, the boat was actually flexible, but not unbreakable.
So this ship bent more than other ships. Ari, if you take a paperclip and you bend it 1,000 times, what's going to happen?
It'll snap.
So that's one of the theories.
John refuses to close the door on any of the theories, but he thinks the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald was likely caused by a pile-on of problems.
The storm and some decisions by McSorley and mechanical failures and so on, these things start adding up after a while.
Yeah. 29 people died in that storm when the ship went down. Who were they?
People ask, why did I write this book? And I grew up in the Great Lakes, and we swim in these lakes, we sail in these lakes. But what really drove me is not to figure out what happened, to find out what these lives were like and who these 29 people were. They were common men doing uncommon work, is how I describe it. Blue-collar guys, blue-collar families, felt lucky to get out of World War II alive, felt lucky to get out of the mines and the factories and the farms. But it was a hard life. They worked very hard. They're very stoic. They enjoyed a good prank. They played a lot of cards. They drank a lot of beer. That's the short profile.
But there's one man whose story lingers in John's memory and highlights just how much was lost when the Fitzgerald went down. Crew member Bruce Hudson was a former forestry student at Ohio State.
He ran cross country there and he's in the band and an Eagle Scout. But he's also a bit of a devil. And he had a motorcycle and a girlfriend in Toledo. And he discovers in September by phone, when he's in a port, Silver Bay in Minnesota, that his girlfriend in Toledo is pregnant. And he says, don't worry, we're going to move in together. We'll raise the child together. We're going to be okay. So he now knows that he's going to be a father when he gets home.
But as we know, Bruce didn't live to meet his baby. And Bruce's own mother, Ruth, lost her only child when the Edmund Fitzgerald sank. But she had a surprise in store when she finally heard from Bruce's girlfriend, Cindy.
She's met the girlfriend before. She has no idea that she's pregnant. 6 months later, Cindy calls her and tells her, I think you should know this. You're going to be a grandmother in a few weeks. Oh. And Ruth Hudson can't believe it. She's lost her only child, and now she's going to get a granddaughter. That granddaughter, Heather, she's got 4 kids. The oldest is Austin. Austin looks just like Bruce Hudson. Wow. And as you might imagine, Ruth Hudson played favorites with her great-grandkids, and Austin got favorable treatment. So these are the kind of stories I got by talking to these families, and they trusted me with them.
Are the families still waiting for answers in some sense?
At first, they cared very much about the answers, and now they don't care at all. And that is consistent. And they say, everyone's trying to chase down this theory or that theory. It changes nothing for us. Our fathers, our uncles, our cousins, our boyfriends, they're gone.
John, why has the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald been such a big deal? How did the story become so famous and embedded in American culture?
Well, the first and short answer is clearly the song by Gordon Lightfoot. The song sort of keeps it alive.
That is the 1976 folk rock ballad called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Lightfoot had been a recreational sailor on the Great Lakes and was moved by the story of the Fitzgerald's demise. That song became one of Lightfoot's biggest hits and among his proudest achievements.
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy.
John says the families of the crew members have embraced it too.
They play the song at their family reunions for the grandkids who never knew their grandfathers.
Between the popularity of Lightfoot's song and the tragedy and mystery of the shipwreck itself, the Edmund Fitzgerald has long been a subject of regional intrigue. In the years following the sinking, some people dove to the lake floor and illicitly took photos or pillaged taconite and other objects from the wreckage. The families of the crew were upset, and so they petitioned the Canadian government. That's because the remains of the freighter lie just near the border on the Canadian side of Lake Superior.
After years of letter writing and calls and meetings, it has been declared a national gravesite and can no longer go down there without the permission of the families.
The families have granted consent to a set of respectful dives, so some articles from the ship have made their way to the families.
Bruce Hudson's daughter, who never met her father, she has in her purse a jar of Lake Superior water and Edmund Fitzgerald taconite, and that jar goes with her in her purse wherever she goes.
Another descendant carries the memory on her body as well.
Heidi Brabon is the daughter of Blaine Wilhelm, an oiler on the ship. He, of course, went down with the ship. Her daughter never met her grandfather, and on her arm it is tattooed, "We are holding our own."
The captain's line.
Of course, the last words we know of from the Edmund Fitzgerald.
The Edmund Fitzgerald still lies in pieces on the lake floor where it sank 5 decades ago, but the ship's legacy continues to impact the way commercial shipping is conducted across the Great Lakes, primarily around safety. Before the Edmund Fitzgerald, shipwrecks on the Great Lakes were not uncommon.
From 1875 to 1975, when this ship went down, there were 6,000 commercial shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. That is an average of about one per week for a century. And the Edmund Fitzgerald is the last one. None in 50 years. And the families take pride in that because this got so much national attention, thanks to the song, thanks to Newsweek magazine, the Associated Press, that they finally realized we got to fix this.
Weather forecasting improved, as did technology and communication practices. In addition,
common sense, even from the shipping companies, who realized you wait a day, what have you lost? Not much. The ship is there, the cargo is there, and let's hope they care about the crew as well. So common sense has also kicked in. Not one shipwreck on the Great Lakes since the Edmund Fitzgerald.
But there is a community of shipwreck hunters on the Great Lakes because, remember, there are still thousands of sunken boats out there from decades and centuries past, and they hold important clues to the region's history.
They're finding them all the time. They found 2 more this summer that they've been looking for 100 years. So as technology advances, sooner or later they're going to find almost all of them, is my guess.
John, thank you so much for your time and for sharing the story of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Ari, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And thanks for a great conversation and great questions.
To read more about shipwrecks on the Great Lakes and the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, visit SmithsonianMag.com. We'll put a link in our show notes. In our next episode, we'll be diving into the wild world of shipwreck archaeology, discussing what it's actually like to dive down to these underwater wrecks with maritime archaeologist Tamara Thompson. So stay tuned for that. If you like There's More to That, consider leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts. There's More to That is a production of Smithsonian Magazine and PRX Productions. From the magazine, our team is me, Debra Rosenberg, and Brian Wolly. From PRX, our team is Allie Budner, Cleo Levin, Genevieve Sponsler, Sandra Lopez Monsalve, and Edwin Ochoa. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzales. Our episode artwork is by Emily Lankowitz, fact-checking by Stephanie Abramson. I'm Ari Daniel. Thanks for listening.
I've come to believe that there's something very elemental about people in ships in trouble. It goes back to Noah's Ark. It's the oldest way of travel we have beyond walking.
Gilgamesh too, right?
All that. It's all that.